You feel the presence of a forgotten god. It's not something visible nor tangible, but it presses upon your chest as you move through the shadows of ancient history. Her name is barely spoken these days, but you know it. The name that once echoed through the heavens. Ishtar. Whisper her name and the air changes, heavy with the scent of something long buried, hidden from the world. The walls of this place, dark and crumbling, are covered with a dust that holds centuries of secrets, yet none of them are written in clear words. The truth is hidden in the shadows, in the flickering candlelight, in the spaces between your breath. Ishtar. You say again, quieter this time, as if saying it too loudly might break something sacred. Your voice trembles as the air shifts around you, like the remnants of a lost ritual that no longer dares to be heard. The ancient stones beneath your feet groan as if disturbed from an eternal slumber. In the stillness, a whisper answers, faint, but undeniable. It's not the goddess herself, but something left behind. A memory, a trace, a curse. The world has forgotten her, but her presence remains in places like this, where time itself is unwilling to let go. You have found her again. Before you, you see the faded remnants of what was once a grand temple, where her followers would have gathered, where priests and priestesses, wrapped in the sacred cloth of her divine love and war, would have invoked her name. Where once her worshipped symbols glimmered under the light of torches, now only faint shadows and cracked stone remain. The echoes of what once was fill this sacred space. Ishtar, you whisper once more. The walls seem to shudder. A fleeting vision of the goddess swirls before you, her face so beautiful yet shadowed by something darker, something fallen. Her eyes, once filled with the radiance of love and hope, now hold the sorrow of exile. But who is Ishtar, really? Once, she was the goddess of love, of fertility, of beauty, and of war. Once her name would have stirred the hearts of the bravest warriors, the deepest lovers, and the most devout worshippers. And yet, now, it is said in hushed tones, as if even to speak it is to invite her wrath. Like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below. If you dare to know more, you hear yourself say, your voice barely audible over the soft sounds of the ancient ruins. It is not a call to action, but an invocation. A command to those who still seek knowledge, to those who still hear the whispers of forgotten gods. The space around you seems to stretch, the walls whispering in response to the sacred duty you've taken upon yourself, to remember Ishtar, to trace the path of her corruption, her fall from grace, and her eventual exile into Taboo. The road ahead is dark, and the further you walk, the deeper the corruption becomes. It was once a light, a beacon of love and life, but now what remains of it is tainted. You know that to journey deeper means to abandon what you think you know, to unravel the threads of history, to follow Ishtar's descent into madness and exile. But you must, for in this journey, there are answers. Now, let us turn the first page. You move deeper into the ruins. The air grows thick, laden, with the scent of ancient dust and the faintest hint of something floral, a reminder of Ishtar's reign, where beauty and war intertwined in perfect harmony. But that harmony is long gone. The stones beneath your feet are cracked, their surfaces worn by centuries of neglect. But still they speak to you. The temples that once echoed with the prayers and cries of her devotees now lie in ruin. Their sacred spaces slowly swallowed by time and nature. Was it always destined to end like this, you wonder? Was the love that once defined Ishtar too powerful to survive the very world she helped create? You pause for a moment to gaze at the crumbled remnants of an altar. Its shape is still discernible, though much of the carving has faded with time. Ancient symbols of love, fertility, and war are etched into the stone, now nothing more than shadowy echoes. You can almost hear the chants of priests, the rustle of garments, the soft flickering of candles in her honor. But that sound is distant now, replaced by silence. A faint memory stirs within you. Ishtar was never just a goddess of beauty and love. She was also a protector, a fierce warrior who wielded power on the battlefield, her presence a divine command to those who followed her. It said that her warriors carried her sigils, marking them as her chosen, her champions in both the dance of love and the brutality of war. Now those sigils are only remnants, ancient heresies that have been erased from sacred texts, their meanings twisted into something darker. The crumbling walls seem to close in around you as if the very air is rejecting your presence. There's something unsettling here, a weight you can't place, as though you are walking through a place that was never meant to be found. You touch the wall, and for a fleeting moment, you feel a jolt. Not just a physical sensation, but something deeper, as though the temple itself recognizes you. The touch awakens something, or maybe it's just your imagination, but it feels as if the walls breathe with you. In that moment, you recall a whisper from an ancient text, a line so obscure, so forbidden, that it was struck from the records, long ago. It speaks of Ishtar's ultimate betrayal, the moment when she was cast from the divine halls of the heavens. She had grown too powerful, too revered, and in her arrogance she made a fateful decision to challenge the gods themselves. The betrayal was not by another god, as many had believed, but by her own pride. She had sought to transcend her divine nature, to make herself something greater, something unavoidable. It was this ambition that led to her exile. Did she deserve it? The question echoes in your mind. You are not sure anymore. The more you walk these ruins, the more you realize that Ishtar's fall was not a simple story of divine rejection. It was a tragedy, a slow descent into darkness brought about not by malice but by a need to grow, to be more than what she was, a need that shattered the very foundation of her divinity. The wind stirs, carrying a faint voice with it. You hear it, distant but unmistakable, as if it is rising from the depths of the earth itself. You shall not see the face of the gods again. The words are hollow, laden with the weight of something ancient, something that had been whispered across generations, forgotten by time but still remembered in the rustle of the wind. You step away from the altar, unable to remain near it any longer. As you move deeper into the temple, you notice that the shadows seem to grow longer, as if the very light is being consumed by the darkness. You find yourself walking through a maze of collapsing columns and fallen statues, each piece of debris a reminder of the greatness that once was. But even in this decay, something stirs, a presence that feels too real, too close, even as you sense it slipping further away. The path narrows, and the air thickens, a heavy weight pressing down on your chest, as though the ruins themselves are aware of your intrusion. Somewhere far off you hear the soft sound of water, a trickling rhythmic flow, as though an underground stream flows beneath these forsaken halls. Is it a sign? Or just the trickle of a world slowly slipping away into nothingness? It is said that Ishtar's temples, even in their ruined state, still possess a power, a dormant energy left behind by the goddess herself. Those who dare enter these forgotten spaces feel it, a strange pull, as if she is still here, watching, waiting. You reach the heart of the temple, and what you find there sends a shiver through you. There, lying beneath the crumbled remains of a shattered column, is a relic, an object once sacred, now forsaken. It is the sigil of Ishtar, her symbol of love and war, worn and faded but unmistakable. It is a reminder of who she was, who she could have been, and the power that she once wielded. But now it is nothing more than a forgotten mark. As you touch the relic, the sensation returns, that jolt of recognition, that brief feeling of connection. Ishtar's presence lingers here deep within these ruins beneath the dust and decay. But it is not the presence of a god. It is the memory of a goddess who once held the world in her grasp, a memory now lost, faded, and hollowed out by time. And yet you feel it. Ishtar is still here. She is not gone, not yet. You cannot escape it. The air in this forsaken temple grows heavier with each step you take, as though the walls themselves hold their breath, waiting for you to uncover the truth. The truth that Ishtar herself took to the grave, and perhaps Beyond it, the goddess of love and war, once exalted in the heavens, now reduced to nothing more than a whispered name in the dark corners of forgotten lore. Yet here you stand, deep within the ruins, feeling her presence all around you, her story half remembered, half forgotten. Ishtar's origins are shrouded in a fog of mystery. Her name carries weight, and the myths surrounding her are manifold, tangled in the threads of time, woven through a tapestry so ancient that its edges have worn away. Scholars have long debated her true nature, her beginnings. Some say she was born from the primordial waters of the cosmos, a daughter of the very fabric of creation, her power flowing from the heartbeat of the world itself. Others suggest a more complex tale, that she emerged from the moon, a reflection of its cyclical nature, her life ebbing and flowing with the changing tides of the night sky. But the truth is far more elusive. Did she emerge from the sea? Or from the moon? Or was she something altogether different? Perhaps she was the embodiment of the earth itself, fertile yet destructive, a goddess whose duality could neither be fully grasped nor easily understood. You feel the weight of this uncertainty as you wander further into the ruins. The path winds down, narrow and winding, as if leading you deeper into the heart of the mystery. The temple's walls are covered in faded carvings, depictions of Ishtar in various forms, a goddess of war with fierce eyes, a goddess of love with arms outstretched in compassion. Each image is at odds with the other, yet they exist together, in harmony. The duality of Ishtar was her defining feature, the essence of her power and the reason for her downfall. It is said that her worshippers were never truly certain of her nature. To them she was both a nurturer and a destroyer, a figure whose love could heal or harm in equal measure. They offered sacrifices to her not only for love but also for war, believing that she held dominion over both, that only through her could they experience the fullness of life. Was that the flaw in her worship? Her followers failed to understand that to embrace both love and war, creation and destruction, was to walk a dangerous line, one that no mortal should tread lightly. Perhaps Ishtar too had walked that line, too far. The deeper you move into the temple, the more these questions begin to haunt you, consuming your thoughts as the air thickens. Every step you take feels like an intrusion, as though you are trespassing in a space that was never meant for mortals to understand. Suddenly, you come across a chamber deep within the heart of the temple. It is small, almost hidden, with low ceilings and walls lined with shelves. On these shelves, ancient scrolls lie, their edges curled and faded with age. The texts are written in a language that you cannot quite comprehend, though the symbols seem familiar, like a reflection of something once known. You reach for one of the scrolls, feeling the rough texture of the parchment as you unroll it slowly. The writing on it is archaic, its characters twisted and strange, but the meaning is clear enough. Ishtar. The name appears again and again, woven into the text like a sacred chant, a prayer for guidance. But as you delve further into the words, a strange truth emerges. The text speaks of a forbidden ritual, one so powerful and dangerous that it was never meant to be completed. It is said that if one were to perform the ritual at the height of the full moon, when Ishtar's power was at its peak, they could commune with her, not as a goddess, but as something far more ancient, something far more primordial. The ritual is incomplete, its steps cryptic, but it hints at a secret buried deep within Ishtar's nature, something that even the gods themselves feared. What was it? What was it that made Ishtar not only a goddess of love and war, but something more, something older? You shudder as you look at the scroll. The text ends abruptly, its last line unfinished, as if the author had been stopped in the midst of writing. The air around you seems to shift, a chill running down your spine. There is more here hidden in the darkness, in the corners of this sacred space. But what is it? What has been left behind in these walls? In the silence, a soft whisper rises, Ishtar once again. But this time the name is no longer one of reverence, it is an invocation, a summons to something else. You feel it in your bones, the pull of a force beyond understanding. A curse? A blessing? Or something far worse? As you set the scroll down, the chamber seems to grow darker, the shadows around you stretching longer and deeper. You hear the faintest sound like a heartbeat pulsing from the walls. Is it the temple itself, or is it Ishtar, still lingering in the forgotten corners of this place, her power seeping through the cracks, refusing to be forgotten? You don't know. The truth is too elusive, too tangled in the threads of her divine mystery. But one thing is clear. The more you uncover, the more you realize that Ishtar's legacy was never meant to be unraveled. It was meant to be forgotten. Yet, here you are, standing in the heart of her ruin, staring into the darkness that refuses to let go of her. You can feel it now, the weight of her downfall. Ishtar's name, once sung in praises of devotion and worship, now lies in ruins. The very ground beneath your feet seems to mourn for her, and as you step deeper into the labyrinth of crumbling stone and forgotten altars, you realize that her fall was not sudden. It was slow, insidious, a gradual descent that began with a single choice, a single moment of defiance that would forever change the course of her divine existence. Ishtar, once the embodiment of love and beauty, became entangled in the webs of her own power. Her divine reign stretched across both the tender embrace of passion and the violent clash of warriors. But it was the clash, the destruction, that would ultimately claim her. For in her great ambition, she sought to transcend the limits of her divinity, to rise above the duality that defined her. She was not content merely to be a goddess of love and war. She wanted more. She sought the forbidden, the key to immortality, beyond the gods themselves. And in her quest for this forbidden power, she made a fateful choice. It is whispered that Ishtar, in her arrogance, challenged the gods, not in open warfare, but in a quieter, more dangerous way. She sought to break the very foundation of her divine essence, to transcend her place in the celestial hierarchy and become something beyond divine. She delved into forbidden knowledge, rituals that were sealed away even from the gods themselves, rituals that spoke of an ultimate transformation, of becoming not just a goddess, but a force of nature, an eternal power beyond creation and destruction. Her followers did not know this, of course. To them, Ishtar remained the goddess of love, of passion, of war, a force they could understand, worship, and fear. They offered their sacrifices to her with love in their hearts, and yet they unknowingly contributed to her fall. For in seeking to transcend her divine boundaries, Ishtar had begun to lose touch with the very essence of her being. She had become too great, too powerful. Her connection to her followers, to the mortals who revered her, had weakened. Other gods, jealous and fearful of her ambition, took notice. They saw the cracks in her divine persona, the subtle shifts in her power, and they decided that she must be stopped before her influence threatened the very fabric of the heavens themselves. So, they cast her out, her name stricken from the sacred texts, her temples destroyed and her worship outlawed. But even then, even in her exile, Ishtar's presence lingered. The curse of her fall was not just her banishment, it was the loss of her connection to the mortal world, to her followers. She became a goddess who no longer understood love as the mortals did, who no longer understood war as the warriors did. In her quest for something greater, she had lost everything that made her who she was. And this is where you stand now, in the heart of her broken temple, a place where her essence once thrived. The walls are crumbling, the air thick with the remnants of a divine presence that cannot be forgotten. The whispers of Ishtar still echo here, faint but undeniable, as if her spirit is trapped in the ruins, caught in the same endless cycle of ascent and fall. You wonder, is this what happens to all gods who strive to become too powerful? Do they too lose their connection to those who once worshipped them? Or is there something unique about Ishtar's fate? Was she cursed because of her ambition? Or was she doomed from the start? Her dual nature always destined to lead her down a path of self-destruction. The path ahead is unclear, the answers shrouded in myth and forgotten rites. But the question gnaws at you. Is this the inevitable end? Of all gods? To strive for power only to lose it, to become a taboo, a name spoken in fear, a legend twisted by time into something darker, something more dangerous? As you stand in the silence, you can almost hear the goddess's voice calling. To you, a faint whisper, as though she is reaching out from the beyond. But this is not a call of affection. It is the call of something lost, something that cannot be reclaimed. Your hand reaches for the shattered remnants of a stone tablet, one that would have once held the sacred words of Ishtar's worship. It is worn, barely legible, but as your fingers trace the cracks, a single word stands out: forgotten, and it strikes you. Ishtar did not merely fall from grace. She was forgotten, erased, not by time alone, but by those who feared her power. She was a goddess whose ambition led her to destroy everything that once defined her, and in doing so, she became a shadow of herself, a tragic figure whose power now exists only in the whispers of those who dare to remember her. The chamber seems to grow colder, darker. The faintest draft stirs the dust, but the silence is overwhelming. You feel the presence of Ishtar now, not as a goddess of love or war, but as something else, a force beyond both, a being torn between the heavens and the earth, forever seeking what she can never regain. In the distance, you hear the soft rustling of paper, a page turning somewhere within the ruins. It's the sound of the past, the forgotten chapters of her story. And you realize that you too are becoming part of that story, a story that will never end, because Ishtar's fall is not just a single event. It is a cycle, a tragic tale that will repeat for as long as the gods are remembered. And so, you turn another page, and the descent continues. There is something about this place, a heavy, suffocating presence, as though the very walls of the temple are breathing with you. The deeper you venture, the more palpable the air becomes, thick with forgotten power. You can almost feel the vibrations of an ancient ritual still lingering here, as though it was performed just moments ago, and yet, it was centuries before. The ritual of the sacred veil. It was in this very temple, in these hallowed halls, that the followers of Ishtar once came to enact this forbidden ceremony. It is said to have been one of the most intimate rites in her worship, a way to commune directly with the goddess, to feel the essence of her love and war in its purest form. But it was not just a prayer or an offering, it was something more. It was a rite that bridged the mortal and the divine, bringing her followers into direct communion with Ishtar's essence. But it was also a rite of deep secrecy, performed only in the deepest chambers of the temple, in the darkness where the light of the gods could not reach. For it was not just love that Ishtar embodied, nor war. It was the very essence of what it meant to be human, to be bound to both creation and destruction, passion and pain. The veil, the sacred symbol of the ritual, was woven from the finest cloth, dyed in the deepest shades of crimson, symbolizing both life and death. It was said to be imbued with the very essence of Ishtar's duality, love and war, fertility and bloodshed. When one wore the veil, they were not merely standing before a goddess, but stepping into her very essence, becoming a part of her power. Yet the veil itself was not just a symbol of power, it was a test, one that few could pass. To wear the veil was to become vulnerable, to expose the deepest parts of oneself to the goddess, to allow Ishtar to look into the soul, to see the true nature of a person. Those who wore the veil were said to experience an overwhelming vision, a moment of complete surrender, where love and war became one, where the boundaries between God and mortal dissolved. It was a state of pure ecstasy, yes, but it was also a moment of terrifying transformation. But it was this very ritual that led to Ishtar's downfall, for it was not just the goddess who was revealed during the rite of the sacred veil. It was the followers themselves. And in that moment, they saw something they were never meant to see. They saw the truth of Ishtar's nature, her struggle between love and war, her inability to choose one over the other. They saw the brokenness in her divinity, the cracks in her power, and the limits of her godhood. In that moment of vision, Ishtar was no longer the perfect, all-powerful goddess she once seemed. She was something more tragic, more human. She was a goddess who could not escape her own duality, a being trapped between two forces that could never be reconciled. The followers who partook in the ritual were forever changed. They became aware of Ishtar's true nature, and in that knowledge they were condemned. Her love, once all-encompassing, became a curse, for they could never look at her the same way again. And war, once a divine command, became a source of guilt, for they realized it was a reflection of their own inner turmoil. This knowledge was too much for them to bear. They could not live with the truth of Ishtar's fall, the revelation that the goddess they had worshipped, the goddess they had sought to understand, was as fractured and broken as they were. And so the ritual was condemned. It was erased from the records, the sacred texts torn and scattered, and the veil was lost to time. The followers who had partaken in the rite of the sacred veil were cast aside, their names forgotten, their fates sealed in the silence of divine exile. But the question lingers, was it the knowledge of Ishtar's brokenness that led to her downfall, or was it the act of seeking something beyond her own divine boundaries? To see her in all her glory and all her ruin was to see the very nature of the divine itself, imperfect, conflicted, unable to reconcile its own power with its purpose. And in that knowledge, the divine was shattered. In seeking to transcend her nature, Ishtar exposed the very limits of what it means to be God. She became not a goddess of love or war, but a goddess of truth, a truth that no one, not even the gods, could bear to face. As you stand here in the heart of her forsaken temple, you wonder what it would have been like to wear that veil, to experience the divine in its purest, most unfiltered form. Could you have survived it? Could you have stood before a goddess who had transcended her own perfection, who had become something far more dangerous, far more real than any god had the right to be? The wind stirs again, a cold draft that carries with it a whisper of what was once known. The veil is long gone, but its presence remains here in the very air around you, a reminder of what is lost. The rite of the sacred veil was never meant to be rediscovered. It was a secret that the gods themselves wished to keep buried. And yet here you are, standing at the edge of Ishtar's story, glimpsing the truth that so many have tried to erase. Her fall was not just a punishment. It was a transformation, a revelation of the very fragility of divinity. And as you stand in the silence of the ruined temple, you realize that the veil was not just a symbol of Ishtar's power. It was a symbol of her humanity. And in that humanity, she became as lost as those who once worshipped her. The silence in the temple is oppressive, the stillness of centuries pressing against your chest as though the very air mourns Ishtar's lost divinity. With every step you take deeper into the ruins, it becomes harder to shake the feeling that you are not merely walking through forgotten stone, but through the remnants of a goddess's soul. The path ahead is less certain, but one thing is clear. Ishtar's story is not a simple fall from grace. It is a spiral, a madness that consumed not only the goddess but those who still dared to remember her. Her exile, a divine punishment meant to strip her of her celestial power, was not the end of her existence, but rather the beginning of her transformation. The gods did not destroy her, for to do so would be to acknowledge that even they were vulnerable to the same forces that shaped her. Instead, they cast her out, forcing her to wander, forgotten and cursed, into the shadows. Yet what is exile? For a goddess who once had the world in her grasp, to be abandoned by her divine kin, cast aside like a broken idol, was not the end. It was a distortion of her divine nature, a corruption that turned her power inward, twisting her into something darker, more desperate. The madness of exile seeped into Ishtar's very essence. No longer a goddess of love and war, she became a goddess of loss and a deity who could not reconcile the void left by her banishment. And this is where the true tragedy lies. She was no longer merely a divine being. She became something more akin to a myth, a concept of what might have been, trapped between the mortal and the divine, unable to move in either direction. You trace the walls as you walk through the ruins, your fingers brushing against faded carvings that once depicted Ishtar's many faces. Here, she is the warrior, fierce and commanding. There, she is the lover, her eyes filled with compassion and desire. But as you move deeper into the temple, you see a shift in the artwork. It begins to change. The lines become jagged, the figures distorted, and the once beautiful carvings begin to resemble more grotesque forms, twisted versions of Ishtar's former glory. She is no longer a goddess of love and war. She is something darker, something bent by the weight of her exile. It is said that during her exile, Ishtar wandered the earth searching for a way to reclaim her lost place among the gods. But her search was in vain. No longer welcomed by the heavens, she sought solace in the mortal world, seeking out those who had once worshipped her. It is whispered that she appeared to them in visions, in dreams, but not as the radiant goddess they once knew. She appeared as something fractured, something broken, a reflection of her own inner torment. Her appearance became an omen, a sign of the devastation that followed her wherever she went. Her followers, once eager to offer sacrifices and prayers, now feared her. Her presence, once a blessing, had become a curse. To gaze upon her was to witness the true nature of divine decay. You find yourself standing before a darkened altar, the stone now chipped and worn with time. This altar, once a place of devotion, is now a testament to Ishtar's downfall. It is said that in the final years of her exile, she began to demand more from her followers. No longer content with simple offerings, she sought blood. She sought pain. And in this, her madness only deepened. It was as though she no longer recognized the difference between the gods and the mortals who had once adored her. She became a creature of vengeance, her love replaced by wrath, her compassion by a thirst for destruction. It is here, in the forgotten corners of this forsaken temple, that the true horror of Ishtar's madness can be felt. You trace the inscriptions on the altar, symbols of violence twisted and dark, remnants of her final desperate rituals. They are not symbols of love nor of war. They are symbols of divine self-destruction. Each mark is a cry for help, a plea for salvation, and yet it is a cry that was never answered. You wonder, as you stand before this darkened altar, was Ishtar ever truly guilty? Was she a goddess whose ambition led her to lose her way? Or was she a victim of the gods themselves, cast aside for reasons no one could truly understand? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the darkness, hidden away by the very forces that sought to erase her. The walls tremble with the memory of her rage, of the violent fury that followed her into exile. Her mind, once a source of divine wisdom, fractured under the weight of her abandonment. She began to speak in riddles, in chants that made little sense, her words twisted by the madness that consumed her. And it is in these final, incomprehensible whispers that the true essence of her fall can be heard. A descent not just into madness, but into something far more terrible. The realization that she had been forgotten, erased, and could never return to the heavens. And so, Ishtar wandered, lost between worlds, unable to find her place in either. She was no longer a goddess of love or war. She had become something more primal, more desperate, a figure lost in the void, cursed to wander for eternity. You shudder as the whispers rise again, faint but undeniable. They speak of a goddess who was once revered, once adored, and yet was forsaken. And in that forsakenness, Ishtar found herself trapped, unable to move forward, unable to move back. The madness of her exile is her true curse, a curse that can never be undone, a tragedy that will echo through the corridors of history forever. You stand before an ancient stone pillar, now broken and chipped but still visible enough to carry the weight of history. The symbol carved into its surface is unmistakable, though its meaning is lost to the modern world. Once it was sacred, a mark of devotion, a testament to the unwavering loyalty of Ishtar's followers. Now it has become a mark of heresy, an emblem of what was forbidden. The sigil of Ishtar, once revered as a divine symbol, is no longer seen as a mark of divine favor. It is a symbol of rebellion, a heretical mark that defies the gods. You trace the lines of the symbol, a series of intersecting circles, sharp angles, and curving lines that once formed a complex geometric pattern, full of meaning and purpose. In its time, it represented the goddess herself, her connection to both the heavens and the earth, her role as the embodiment of both love and war. But as Ishtar's power waned, so too did the reverence for her symbols. The more she was erased from the divine pantheon, the more her sacred signs became forbidden. What was once holy became profane, twisted into something dark and dangerous. This mark, now defaced and destroyed, represents not only her downfall, but the betrayal of her very essence. To speak her name, to wear her sigil, was to challenge the gods themselves, to defy the celestial order. You move deeper into the temple, feeling the weight of the symbol's significance. It is said that those who still carried the sigil of Ishtar, in their hearts after her exile, were hunted down, cast out, and persecuted. It became a symbol not of love, but of rebellion, a symbol of the doomed, the damned, the exiled. Those who dared to keep her legacy alive did so at great risk. Their lives were forfeit if they were found by the god-hunting priests, those who were charged with eradicating the memory of Ishtar from the world. As you walk through the crumbling corridors, you notice the remnants of what was once a shrine, broken statues, shattered pottery, and the faint traces of offerings that were once left in her honor. These items, now little more than dust and fragments, were once the cherished treasures of her most devoted followers, but now they are tainted, considered blasphemous, and are hidden away, buried beneath the layers of time. But there, amid the rubble, you find something that sends a chill through your spine. A small worn amulet. It is tarnished, nearly unrecognizable, but you can still make out the faint outline of Ishtar's sigil, etched into the surface of the metal. The amulet, once worn as a sign of reverence, is now a relic of forbidden worship. Those who still possessed such items after her fall were hunted down by the priesthood, forced to abandon their faith or face punishment. You wonder, how many still wear this sigil in secret? How many, like you, have felt the pull of Ishtar's lost power even in her exile? The question is unsettling, for it implies that the goddess's influence has not truly been extinguished. No matter how much time passes, no matter how many generations are born and die, her presence lingers in the forgotten corners of the world, carried by those who refuse to let go of what she once was. The sigil is not the only forbidden symbol tied to Ishtar. There are others, too. Symbols hidden in plain sight, marked on the hidden walls of temples, etched into the backs of ancient manuscripts, woven into the tapestries of long-forgotten palaces. These symbols are not just marks of her presence. They are keys, unlocking the mysteries of her fall, the secrets of her madness. But what if these symbols are not just relics of the past? What if they are a warning? A message from Ishtar herself sent to those who dare to remember her. The symbols seem to pulse with an energy of their own, a faint echo of something more powerful than mere history. You can feel it as you stand. Before them, the pull of something ancient, something lost but not gone. The very air hums with the weight of these forbidden marks, as though they are alive, waiting for someone to awaken them once more. As you continue your exploration, the question becomes clear. What happens when a god's symbols are made forbidden? When the divine is erased, when the symbols of worship are outlawed and discarded, do they lose their power? Or do they become something more dangerous, something even more potent because of their taboo status? You begin to realize that Ishtar's exile, her fall from grace, was not just a loss of power. It was the beginning of something far darker, a transformation of her divinity into something that could never be fully understood, something that could not be destroyed, no matter how much time passed. You leave the relic behind, your fingers still trembling from the touch of the amulet. Its presence lingers in your mind as though the goddess herself is watching, waiting, hoping that someone will remember her, that someone will dare to carry her symbols once more. And as you move deeper into the temple, you realize that Ishtar's fall was not just a tragic end. It was a beginning of something darker, something that could never truly be erased. The deeper you wander into the temple, the more you feel the weight of the divine betrayal, not just Ishtar's, but the betrayal of those who once followed her. Her followers, the ones who dared to step into the darkness with her, now lie, scattered in the winds of history, their names erased from the annals of time. Yet their actions still echo, resonating within the crumbling stones and dust-filled air. The covenant between them and Ishtar, once sacred, once binding, now lies shattered, fragmented like the remnants of the goddess herself. You stand before an altar, broken and half-ruined, where the last of the offerings to Ishtar would have been made. The altar is not just a place of worship, it is a testament to a broken promise. It is here that her followers sought to fulfill the covenant they had made with their goddess. A covenant that promised love, protection, and power in exchange for devotion. But as Ishtar's madness grew, so did the distance between her and her people. The altar became a place not of reverence but of fear, a place where sacrifices were made not in gratitude, but in desperation. The air around you feels thick with the presence of something lost, something broken. You cannot help but feel that the very stones beneath your feet are mourning the loss of that covenant, mourning the goddess who had once been their mistress. But there is something else in the air, something darker, resentment. The covenant was not merely broken by Ishtar, it was shattered by her own actions, her own choices. The promise that once bound the goddess to her people was simple: devotion in exchange for power. But as Ishtar sought to transcend her divine nature, she broke that promise. She sought more than just the love of her followers. She sought control, dominion over the very fabric of the cosmos. Her ambition led her to challenge the divine order itself, to break the very laws that governed the gods and the mortals. And it was this that led to her fall. She no longer saw her followers as equals, as mortals deserving of her love. Instead, she saw them as tools, as pawns in her pursuit of greater power. The love that once defined her became twisted, corrupted by her desire to rise above the gods, and in that corruption she lost everything: her connection to her followers, her place among the divine, and her very humanity. The broken covenant was not just the result of Ishtar's ambition, it was the result of her loss of compassion. The very essence of her being, the thing that had once made her a goddess of love, became a weapon in her quest for power. And in that moment of self-destruction, the covenant was shattered. You kneel before the altar and a strange vision rises before your eyes. It is not a vision of love or war, but of something more primal, a goddess in torment, her mind torn between the forces of creation and destruction. You see Ishtar, not as the radiant goddess she once was, but as something fractured, broken by her own need to transcend, to become something more than a god. You see her desperation, her loneliness, as she seeks to bind herself to something greater, something beyond even the gods. And in that vision you realize the truth. Ishtar's downfall was not a simple matter of divine punishment. It was a consequence of her own choices, her inability to reconcile her divine power with her humanity. Her covenant with her followers was not just broken by the gods, it was broken by Ishtar herself, who lost sight of the very thing that made her divine. You rise from the altar, a sense of melancholy settling in your chest. The broken covenant is not just a tale of a goddess's fall, it is a warning, a reminder that even the most powerful of beings can be consumed by their own desires, their own need for control. And in that consumption they lose everything that made them who they were. You step back from the altar, the weight of the vision heavy upon you. The truth of Ishtar's madness is no longer a mystery. It is a tragic story of ambition, love, and loss. A story that could have been avoided, if only she had remembered the covenant she made with her followers. And yet, even now, as you stand in the silence of the ruined temple, you feel the pull of Ishtar's broken promise. Her presence lingers in the air, not as a goddess of love or war, but as a shadow, a force that once sought to transcend, but in doing so, became something far more dangerous, far more tragic. The covenant may be broken, But the legacy of Ishtar's fall remains as powerful and haunting as the ruins you now stand in. You walk deeper into the temple, past fallen columns and shattered mosaics that once depicted Ishtar's greatness. There is a haunting emptiness here, a void that seems to swallow the very light around you. The sense of loss is overwhelming, not just the loss of the goddess, but the loss of what she once symbolized. The divine love that once enveloped the world now feels hollow, empty. Ishtar, the goddess of love, is now a figure bereft of the very essence that defined her. And it is this absence that stirs the deepest sorrow within you. Her fall from grace did not happen overnight. It was a slow unraveling, a gradual loss of what made her Ishtar, the goddess who embodied the beauty of love and the fury of war. It is said that Ishtar's love was once a force that could heal the deepest wounds, that her touch could ignite the hearts of kings and peasants alike. Her love was a gift, a blessing bestowed upon those who followed her, offering them a sense of belonging, a connection to the divine. But when Ishtar was exiled, cast away from the heavens by the very gods who once revered her, her love turned cold. She became a goddess without a domain, without a people to love. Her divine connection to the mortal world was severed, and in that severance, her love grew twisted, corrupted by isolation and despair. Her once great love became something else, something dangerous. No longer the goddess of nurturing passion, Ishtar became consumed by the absence of love. She sought to reclaim it, to feel its warmth again, but it was a love she could no longer grasp. It was as though the very act of seeking it drove her further from it. She turned to the mortals who had once adored her, but they too had turned their backs on her. They feared her now, seeing in her not the goddess they had once worshipped, but a shadow of herself, a broken being who had lost the essence of love in her quest for power. You can almost hear her whisper now, a faint echo that rises from the depths of the temple. Love. Was it ever real? Or was it just a reflection of something I wanted to believe? The question haunts you, for you realize that Ishtar's downfall was not merely the loss of her divinity, it was the loss of her ability to love. She no longer understood love in its purest form. She no longer understood what it meant to give and to receive without expectation. Her heart, once open and full, had become a cold, empty vessel. As you walk further, you come across a broken statue of the goddess. Her form, once graceful and powerful, now reduced to fragments. Her face, once serene, is now twisted in agony, a reflection of the inner torment she must have felt in her final years. The statue's arms are raised as if reaching out for something, but it is too late. The love that she once gave so freely is gone, and she can never reclaim it. You stand before the statue, your breath catching in your throat. You cannot help but feel a deep sympathy for Ishtar, for she was not only abandoned by the gods, but also by the very love that had once made her a goddess. And yet this loss, this emptiness, is not just the fate of a divine being. It is the fate of all who seek to transcend their nature, to become something greater than what they are. In the end, they lose the very essence of themselves. Ishtar sought to become more than a goddess of love and war, and in that pursuit she became something unrecognizable, something forsaken. You touch the broken statue, feeling the cold stone beneath your fingertips. For a moment you wonder if it would be better to leave this place, to forget Ishtar and her lost love. But even as the thought crosses your mind, you realize that you cannot. Her story is too deeply entwined with the very fabric of this place, too deeply embedded in the ruins you now walk through. You cannot escape it. No one can. The presence of Ishtar lingers, not as a goddess of beauty or passion, but as a reminder of the fragility of love, of how even the most divine of beings can lose themselves when love becomes a hollow echo of what it once was. You leave the broken statue behind, the weight of her loss pressing heavily upon you. As you step further into the temple, the walls seem to close in, as if the very structure is mourning the loss of the goddess's love. The darkness grows deeper, the silence more suffocating, until you are left standing in the heart of the ruins, lost in the shadow of a goddess who once knew love, but can no longer remember it. And you wonder, was it worth it? Was it worth seeking something beyond her nature? Was the ambition to become more than a goddess of love the cause of her destruction? And if it was, what does that say about those who seek to transcend their own limits? The answer is unclear, but the emptiness in the air speaks louder than any words ever could. Love, once a gift, has become a curse, not because of its inherent nature, but because of the ways in which it was sought and lost. The echoes of warriors past seem to whisper on the wind as you move through the ruins of Ishtar's sacred spaces. The pillars and statues tell stories of love, of war, of divinity, but beneath them, deeper within the earth, there are darker tales to be told. These stories are not of devotion or worship. No, these are the stories of those who followed Ishtar into battle, her warriors, who carried her sigils into the heart of conflict, believing they were fighting in the name of love and justice. But in truth, they were not just soldiers. They were devotees, swayed by the goddess's divine call, willing to sacrifice all in her name. These were not mere men. They were her champions, chosen to fight not just for a goddess, but for an idea that love and war, creation and destruction, could exist together. They were taught that to wield Ishtar's power was to embody her duality. Theirs was the task to carry the sacred sigils and symbols, to wear them proudly on their armor and shields, and to fight for a cause greater than themselves. But as you move deeper into the temple, you realize something terrible. These warriors were not only devotees, they were entrapped. They were bound to Ishtar not by a divine connection to her love, but by their willingness to use her as a means to justify the violence and destruction that lay within their own hearts. The love that Ishtar once offered, pure, nurturing, and life-affirming, was slowly corrupted into something more sinister. Her warriors, once filled with the noble cause of protection and devotion, had turned her love into a weapon. They wielded it like a sword, cutting through enemies, fighting battles not for peace but for conquest. The sacred sigils that once symbolized Ishtar's divine beauty and grace were twisted into emblems of terror. You stand before a broken statue of a warrior, his face marred by time but his expression frozen in defiance. The warrior's hands grasp the hilt of a sword, but the sword itself is cracked, and the sigil of Ishtar is no longer etched into his armor with reverence. It is now a symbol of rage, a tool of destruction, an iron mark burned into the metal, an emblem that speaks of her power twisted into something unrecognizable. It is said that Ishtar's followers, especially her warriors, were given a great gift, the ability to transcend their mortal limitations. But with this gift came a cost. The more they sought to embody the goddess's dual nature, the more they were consumed by it. They could no longer separate love from violence, creation from destruction. To them, war became another form of worship. The goddess's name was invoked before every battle, not to invoke her mercy or her favor, but to summon her wrath. The warriors did not fight for Ishtar's love. They fought for victory. They fought for glory. And in doing so, they lost the very thing that had made them divine in the first place, their humanity. And what of the warriors who remained loyal after her fall, when Ishtar had been cast out of the divine halls? What of those who still wore her sigil, those who still swore their allegiance to her in secret in the shadows? They too became outcasts, much like their goddess. To wear her sigil, to fight in her name after her exile, was to be condemned by the gods. But even then they remained steadfast. They believed that the goddess's love, though twisted, though forsaken, was still worth fighting for. You come across a relic of their devotion, an old tarnished shield, its surface chipped and weathered by time and battle. The sigil of Ishtar is still barely visible, carved into the metal with great care, though the lines are distorted, scratched by the violence it once protected. This shield, once a sacred object, is now a symbol of her warriors' broken promises, of their loyalty to a goddess whose love had been corrupted into an instrument of war. As you run your fingers over the shield's surface, you wonder how they could have stayed so loyal. How could they have worshipped a goddess who had turned her love into a weapon, who had allowed it to become a justification for violence and destruction? Perhaps they believed that she had not fallen at all, that her exile was a test of their devotion, a test of their willingness to carry her love into the darkest corners of the world. Or perhaps, as they themselves had become consumed by war, they saw in Ishtar a reflection of their own desires, a desire to wield power, to conquer, to dominate. In that sense, her fall was not just a tragedy for the goddess, it was a tragedy for her followers as well. They too had fallen. They had become warriors of destruction, fighting not for love, but for a cause that was no longer divine. You walk past the shield, its surface cold beneath your touch, and for a moment, you can almost hear the echoes of battle, the clash of weapons, the cries of warriors who once fought in Ishtar's name. Their devotion, their loyalty, now lies shattered along with the goddess herself. And yet, even in their fall, even in their exile, there is still a part of you that cannot shake the feeling that these warriors, despite their violence, despite their corruption, were not entirely lost. Their loyalty to Ishtar, though twisted, was born out of love. Perhaps it was misguided love, but love nonetheless. They sought something greater than themselves, and in doing so, they lost everything. You wonder then, if Ishtar's greatest tragedy was not her fall, but the fall of those who once worshipped her. For in their devotion, they too became something else, something lost, something forgotten. The temple grows colder, its shadows deeper, as you venture further into the heart of Ishtar's long-abandoned sanctuary. The silence here is profound, broken only by the faintest rustling of ancient dust, the whispered echoes of rituals long forgotten. The air seems thick with the weight of lost devotion, of lives that once believed in the goddess who ruled both love and war. You feel it now like a ghost at your back, an unspoken presence, a force that was never meant to be forgotten. And yet, the world has tried to erase it. Ishtar's connection to the moon was always her most sacred bond, though it is little known today. While the world remembers her as the goddess of love and war, of creation and destruction, few still recall that she was once deeply tied to the lunar cycles. In the light of the full moon, her power was at its peak, the moon reflecting the phases of her own divine nature, waxing and waning with each passing moment. For Ishtar, the moon was more than just a celestial body. It was a mirror, reflecting both the beauty and the cruelty of her own being. Her moods, like the phases of the moon, fluctuated between the extremes of passion and fury, creation and annihilation. But now, as you stand in the dim light of the temple's deepest chamber, it is not the moon that you see. It is only darkness. And yet you cannot shake the feeling that the moon is still there, watching, waiting. Even in her exile, Ishtar's connection to the lunar cycle persists. The moon may have abandoned her, but she has not abandoned it. The lunar influence on Ishtar was profound. It was said that when the moon was full, Ishtar would rise to her full power, embodying both the gentleness of love and the ruthless power of war. It was on nights such as those that the goddess's presence was most strongly felt, as though she were both a tender lover and a warlord, her power flowing from the very fabric of the universe. In the light of the full moon, she was both divine and mortal, a being who understood both the depths of affection and the heights of destruction. But the moon, like Ishtar, was subject to change. As the moon waned, so too did her power. When Ishtar was cast from the heavens, the moon's influence over her began to fade. No longer did she stand at the height of her divine strength, bathed in the silver light of the moon. Instead, she was left in the dark, a goddess whose phases had come to an end. You pause, standing still in the center of the chamber. The weight of Ishtar's loss presses upon you. For her, the moon was a constant companion, an eternal cycle of growth and decay. And yet, now that she is abandoned, her power has become fragmented. Her once immense connection to the moon is now only a distant memory, a reminder of what she was before her fall. She is no longer the goddess of the full moon, but a shadow of herself, trapped in a cycle that has left her behind. You can almost hear the whispering of forgotten hymns, songs once sung by her followers beneath the full moon, invoking her power. Those songs now lie silent, buried under layers of dust and time. And yet there are some who still remember them. The ritual chants, the prayers, the songs. They linger in the back of your mind, their words just out of reach, like a memory that refuses to fade. Ishtar's connection to the moon is also tied to her divine cycles, the way her nature mirrored, the moon's phases growing full and radiant, then fading into darkness. But this cycle was interrupted by her exile. Now, the moon's influence over her is only a pale shadow of what it once was. It is said that those who sought to understand Ishtar's true nature, her true power, could not simply worship her during the full moon. They had to understand her as a reflection of the cycles of the universe itself, with all its ebbs and flows, its highs and lows, its moments of creation and destruction. And yet, the connection between Ishtar and the moon was not just a physical one. It was symbolic, a representation of the goddess's eternal struggle between love and war, creation and decay. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, so too did Ishtar's divine nature, constantly shifting, constantly changing, never static, never the same. The love she offered was not simple, it was complex, fraught with contradictions pulled in opposite directions. So too was her war, a battle that was not only fought on the battlefield but within her very soul. As you move through the temple, you notice a large mural on the wall, faded but still discernible. It depicts Ishtar standing alone beneath a full moon, her face half hidden in shadow. She is surrounded by symbols of both love and war, flowers and weapons, hearts and blood. The image is beautiful, but there is a sadness to it, a sense of loss that echoes through the depiction. The moon, once her companion, now stands as a distant witness to her fall, her power fading with each passing cycle. You stop in front of the mural, mesmerized by the image. It is as though the goddess herself is staring back at you, her gaze both tender and weary. The image reflects the duality of Ishtar's nature, her eternal struggle to reconcile the forces within her, the love that could heal and the war that could destroy. But now, even that duality seems fractured. The goddess who once stood as a symbol of balance is now a broken figure, her connection to the moon and its cycles a faded memory, a symbol of what was lost. As you stand before the mural, you hear it again, the whisper of the moon, faint but undeniable. It is as though Ishtar's power still lingers here, a ghost in the dark waiting for someone to remember her, to call upon her once more. But you know that even if you did, the goddess who once stood in full glory beneath the moon is no longer the same. She is a shadow, lost in the darkness, awaiting the return of the light. And yet the moon still weeps for her. The darkness grows heavier as you walk deeper into the ancient temple, where the walls seem to close in on you, drawing you ever closer to the heart of Ishtar's forgotten world. The air is thick with silence, but it is not an empty silence. It is a silence that hums with the weight of forbidden truths, buried under layers of dust and time. There is something deeply unsettling in the stillness here, as though the very place holds its breath, waiting for something to awaken. The name of Ishtar, once spoken with reverence and love, is now a taboo. It is a name that should never be uttered aloud. To speak it is to invite misfortune, to summon the wrath of the gods. In the years following her exile, her name was erased from the sacred texts, stricken from the memories of those who once worshipped her. Her followers were told to forget her, to never speak of her again. And yet even in this silence, even in this forced forgetting, Ishtar's presence lingers, undiminished by time. You feel the weight of the taboo as you move through the temple. There is a strange tension in the air, a palpable sense of danger that clings to the very walls. You can almost feel the gods watching you, their judgment heavy in the atmosphere. Ishtar's name is not merely a word, it is a force, an energy that, when invoked, shatters the quiet, ripples through the fabric of the divine order. The gods knew that to speak her name was to awaken something dangerous, something they had worked so hard to erase. You reach a small alcove in the temple, where the stone walls are covered in faded carvings. The symbols are worn and almost indecipherable, but there, amidst the carvings, is a figure. The goddess, depicted with her arms outstretched, surrounded by the symbols of love and war. But in the center of the image, you see something different, something that wasn't there before. The figure is crowned with a symbol, one you recognize from the scrolls, the symbol of Ishtar's power. It is the forbidden sigil, a mark of her divinity, a mark that has been erased from the world yet still survives here, hidden in the shadows. And then, you notice something even more chilling. Beneath the figure, there is a word. The letters are partially obscured, eroded by time, but you can still make out the first few letters. Isht, the name that was never supposed to be spoken. The discovery sends a shiver down your spine. For a moment, you stand frozen in the alcove, staring at the forbidden word as though its very presence is enough to stir the dormant power within these walls. You cannot help but feel a sense of unease, as if you have just crossed an invisible boundary, a line that should never have been approached. But there it is, plain as day. The name of Ishtar, written in stone, defying the very edicts of the So, gods who sought to erase her. The taboo has been broken, and with it a flood of questions rises to the surface. Why was her name erased? What is the power contained within her name? To speak it, to invoke it, is to bring the wrath of the gods down upon you, and yet here it is in the depths of the temple where no one is meant to find it. You wonder if anyone else has seen this, if anyone else has dared to venture into this forgotten space, to uncover the truth that the gods themselves sought to hide. And if they have, what did they find? Did they too feel the weight of the taboo pressing upon them, warning them to leave Ishtar's name in the past, to never speak it again? The truth is, the name of Ishtar is not just a name. It is a key, a doorway to something far more ancient, far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. It is a name that has been buried, hidden, erased, but it will not stay forgotten. The more you uncover, the more you realize that Ishtar's power was never truly lost. It was simply hidden away, waiting for someone brave enough, or foolish enough to seek it out. You stand before the carvings, feeling the pull of the name. You could speak it aloud, call upon the goddess whose power still lingers here beneath the surface. But you know what that would mean. The gods have forbidden it for a reason. To speak her name is to awaken something that should remain dormant, something that cannot be controlled, and yet in this moment you can't help but wonder what would happen if you did. The question lingers in the air unanswered. But as you step back from the alcove, you feel the weight of Ishtar's presence more keenly than ever. Her name may be forbidden, but it has not been forgotten. It is a part of this place, a part of this world, and no matter how hard the gods try to erase it, it will always find a way back into the light. You turn away from the alcove, the forbidden name still echoing in your mind, and continue your journey through the ruins. But as you walk, you feel a growing sense of unease. Ishtar's power, her legacy, is not something that can be erased. It is something that will always return, like the moon, like the cycles of life and death, of love and war. And so, you walk deeper into the temple, knowing that you have uncovered something that was never meant to be found. The name of Ishtar is no longer a taboo to you. It is a key, and the door it opens is one that may never close again. The air in the temple grows heavy, as if the very walls themselves are aware of the questions lingering within your mind. As you walk deeper into the darkened corridors, a sense of unease clings to you. The name of Ishtar has been spoken aloud. Forbidden though it is, and in that utterance you realize you have crossed a threshold. Her power, her presence, is not something that can be so easily dismissed. It was never truly erased. It has only been buried, hidden away by those who feared what it could bring. And yet, as you move through the crumbling halls, the one question that continues to rise within you, the one question that remains unanswered, is this: what was Ishtar's final fate? Was she destroyed, cast into the void, lost to the eons of time? Or did she, in the end, transcend her divine form, becoming something beyond godhood, something more ancient, more primal than any of the gods could have imagined. You feel a pull, a strange compulsion, as though the temple itself is beckoning you towards something. Your footsteps echo through the silence, the only sound in a place so ancient, so filled with forgotten power. You wonder if Ishtar's name, now spoken and remembered, is the key to uncovering the mystery of her ultimate fate. Was she truly destroyed? Or was her exile merely the beginning of something darker, something far older than any divine being? As you round a corner, you come upon another set of walls covered in carvings so faded that they are nearly invisible to the naked eye. But as you study them more closely, a few figures begin to emerge from the shadows. The goddess Ishtar, depicted once more, but this time there is a distinct difference. Her face is not serene, it is not peaceful. It is twisted, consumed by some kind of divine madness, her eyes wide with a terrifying intensity. The carving shows her standing alone, surrounded by the symbols of destruction, broken swords, shattered shields, and the remnants of once beautiful flowers that have now withered and turned to dust. It is as though the image itself is alive, as though Ishtar's very essence is still embedded in the stone, trapped within the walls of this forsaken temple. You feel a chill run down your spine as you study the figure. She is no longer the goddess of love and war. She is something else, something that cannot be defined, something caught between divine destruction and eternal exile. And yet, there is something in her eyes that seems familiar, something that tugs at your memory, something human. You realize with a shock that Ishtar's fate, her fall from grace, was not something imposed upon her. It was something that she chose. In her quest for transcendence, in her desire to become more than a goddess of love and war, she turned away from the divine path that had been set for her. She reached beyond the heavens and in doing so became lost, trapped between the mortal and the divine, unable to return to either. It is in this moment that the true question becomes clear. Was Ishtar destroyed by the gods, or did she destroy herself? Her downfall is not just a story of divine punishment. It is a story of ambition, of the desire to rise above one's own limitations and the cost that comes with such ambition. The gods did not cast her out of malice. They cast her out because she became too powerful, too dangerous. But the gods were not the true architects of her fall. It was Ishtar herself, in her quest for something more, for something beyond what even the gods could offer her. As you continue to study the carvings, a voice, faint but unmistakable, rises in the air. It is not Ishtar's voice, but something else, something darker, something older. It speaks not in words, but in a sense, a feeling that grows within your chest. You could have been more, Ishtar. You could have ascended, but instead you chose to fall. The voice is chilling, but it is not a curse. It is a statement of fact. And as you stand there, bathed in the dim light of the ruined temple, you realize that Ishtar's fate was never sealed by the gods, nor by time. It was sealed by her own choices, by the ambition that led her to seek something greater, something that no god could ever offer. Perhaps that is why she is still here, still lingering in the corners of this forsaken place. Not as a god, but as a memory of what could have been. A goddess who sought to transcend only to find herself lost in the very emptiness she sought to fill. You step back from the carvings, your heart heavy with the knowledge that Ishtar's true fate will never be known. She was not destroyed, nor was she lost. She was transformed, shattered by her own ambition. And in that transformation, she became something more and less than a goddess. You wonder if you too are now trapped in her story, drawn into the web of questions and mysteries that surround her. Ishtar's fate is not an answer. It is an enigma, a divine riddle that can never be solved, only whispered in the dark corners of the world, waiting for those who dare to listen. The temple stretches before you, a vast and crumbling labyrinth once alive with the fervent worship of Ishtar's followers. But now, it is nothing but silence. The walls whisper only the echoes of forgotten rituals, and the dust seems to settle, deeper with each passing moment, sealing away the memory of the goddess forever. And yet you feel something else, a presence, faint but undeniable, like a lingering breath in the dark. It's the presence of the last followers, those who continued to worship Ishtar in secret, even after her exile, even after her fall from grace. They were not many. Most abandoned her when the gods cast her out, when her name was struck from sacred texts and her temples torn asunder. But there were those who could not forget her, those who still felt her presence in their hearts, who still heard the whispers of her power in the quiet of the night. They were the ones who kept her memory alive, who wore her sigil in secret, who continued to speak her name, even though to do so was to risk their very lives. You think of them now, these hidden worshippers, and you wonder, what drove them to continue their devotion to a goddess who was no longer welcomed by the heavens? Was it love? Was it fear? Or was it something darker? Something tied to Ishtar's very nature? A connection that could never be severed, no matter how hard the gods tried to erase it. You move deeper into the temple, and as you do, the air seems to shift, as if the very stones are responding to your thoughts. There is a faint smell in the air now, something familiar yet haunting. Incense, perhaps, or the faint trace of flowers that once adorned Ishtar's altars. But these flowers have long since withered, their scent fading, their petals lost to time. And yet, in this moment, you catch a glimpse of them. Flowers that have not decayed, not withered, but instead seem to bloom in secret, hidden from the eyes of the world. You feel the weight of these last followers, their devotion still palpable, even after so many centuries. They are the ones who kept Ishtar alive, the ones who held on to the belief that her love and her power had not truly been lost. They were the ones who continued to seek her out, to call upon her, even as the rest of the world forgot her. And now, as you stand here in the ruins of her temple, you realize that you too are a part of this unbroken chain, for you have come seeking her, searching for the answers that no one else dared to ask. You find yourself standing before an altar, hidden in the deepest recesses of the temple, its surface still adorned with remnants of offerings. The incense burners, though long extinguished, still bear the faintest traces of smoke, as if they were only recently used. The flowers, though dried and withered, still retain a strange vitality, as though they have not fully given up their connection to Ishtar. You reach out and gently touch the altar, feeling the smooth surface beneath your fingertips. It is cold, but there is something else, something hidden beneath the stone, a warmth, a faint pulse, like the lingering echo of a heartbeat. This altar is different. It is not just a place of worship. It is a place of memory, a place where the last followers came to commune with their goddess. They may have been few, but they were fierce in their devotion. They were the ones who did not fear the wrath of the gods. They were the ones who refused to forget Ishtar, even when all others had turned their backs on her. And now, standing before this altar, you realize that their devotion was not just a plea for Ishtar's return. It was a declaration that she was never truly gone. Her love and her power still linger here, in this place, in the hearts of those who remember her. Ishtar may have been exiled, but she was never truly abandoned. Her followers, though scattered and hidden, carried her with them. And now in this moment you carry her with you too, for you have come seeking her, searching for what was lost. As you stand before the altar, the presence of the last followers becomes palpable, as though they are still here, still watching, still waiting for someone to remember her, someone to carry her name into the world once again. You feel their eyes upon you, the weight of their silent prayers, their whispered invocations. Ishtar's name may be taboo, her temples may have fallen, but the last followers, though they are long gone, are still here in spirit, still watching over her lost legacy. They are the ones who refused to let her fade into nothingness, who kept the flame of her power burning even in the darkest of times. And now, they pass that responsibility to you. You wonder, what now? What does it mean to carry her name, to bear the weight of her legacy? Ishtar's love was once a force that could heal and destroy, that could create and annihilate. And in her fall, she became something darker, something more complex. But even in her exile, there is still a spark of that love, still a trace of that power, hidden beneath the ruins of the world. You step away from the altar, the weight of her presence still heavy upon you. The temple may be lost, the goddess may be gone, but her followers are not forgotten, and you too will carry her with you as you walk through the shadows of the world seeking the answers that no one else dares to ask. You have ventured far into the ruins, deeper than most would dare, and as you stand now in the heart of Ishtar's forsaken temple, a strange stillness falls over you. The air is thick with the weight of centuries. Centuries of forgotten devotion, of silent prayers whispered in the dark, of a goddess's name that once rang with divine power but now echoes only in secret corners of the world. You are here at the end of your journey, and yet it feels as though the journey has only just begun. The presence of Ishtar is no longer something you merely sense. It has become something you feel in the very marrow of your bones. The whispers in the air, the subtle vibrations beneath your feet, the faint smell of incense and flowers long dried, all of it is her love, her power, her fury. It pulses in this place, clinging to the stone, to the broken statues, to the remnants of the altars where her last followers once knelt. Her name, once forbidden, is now alive again in your mind, reverberating in the silence like a heartbeat that will not stop. You stand before the shattered remnants of a statue of Ishtar. The face, though cracked and eroded, still carries an undeniable beauty, an otherworldly grace. She is holding a weapon in one hand, a symbol of her power, and in the other, the faintest trace of something softer, something more compassionate. The duality of Ishtar is still apparent, even in her broken form, even after all that has been lost. The love that once defined her now seems like a distant memory, and yet it clings to the very air, a silent echo of what once was. As you gaze at the statue, you hear it, faint at first like a distant wind, but growing louder, clearer. The voice, Ishtar's voice. Not in the way you would expect a goddess to speak, not in thunderous proclamations or divine commands, but in a whisper, a soft, yearning whisper, as though she is calling to you from the deepest recesses of the earth. You have come, after all this time. The words, though whispered, seem to resonate through your very being, vibrating the stones beneath your feet. You are not sure if the voice is a figment of your imagination, a trick of the temple's silent walls, or something more. But one thing is certain, it is real. The call of the exiled goddess is not a plea. It is not an invitation to return to the heavens, nor a request for you to worship her. It is something deeper. It is a question, a challenge, a test of whether you are willing to continue down this path, to bear the weight of her legacy, to remember her when all others have forgotten. For a moment, you hesitate. Ishtar's fall was not just the loss of a goddess, it was the loss of a belief, a system that once tied the heavens to the earth, love to war, creation to destruction. To answer her call is to carry that belief forward, to reclaim her power, and with it the very nature of her duality. But it is not an easy task. It comes with the weight of centuries of divine exile, with the knowledge that Ishtar's power has long since faded from the world. To remember her is to carry her burden, a burden that once broke her followers and cast her from the divine halls. But you know, deep within your heart, that you cannot walk away. The call of the exiled goddess is not one that can be ignored. It is a whisper that grows louder, a presence that grows stronger with each passing moment. You are drawn into it, as if the temple itself is reaching out to you, urging you to listen, to understand, to take the next step. The next whisper is older still, but only for those who truly listened. The words, though simple, carry a weight that you cannot ignore. This is not just a story of Ishtar, nor is it just a tale of gods and mortals. This is the story of something that transcends both, of something ancient, something primordial, that lies hidden beneath the surface of the world. Ishtar's exile was not the end of her. It was the beginning of something far darker, far more profound. And now you stand at the threshold of that darkness, on the verge of discovering the truth that has been buried for so long. The shadows seem to grow longer, the walls of the temple closing in around you as you step closer to the statue, closer to the source of the voice. It is not the voice of a goddess who has been defeated. It is the voice of something that remains, something that cannot be destroyed, a force that has endured even in exile, even in silence. If your candle hasn't gone out yet, you might be ready for the next god. The words linger in the air, and you realize that you have crossed the threshold. You are no longer merely an observer of Ishtar's fall. You are part of the story now. Her legacy is yours to carry. The path ahead is uncertain, but the call of the exiled goddess is clear. Ishtar's story is not over, not by a long shot. Her whispers have reached you, and now you must decide. Will you let her name fade into nothingness like so many forgotten gods? Or will you carry it forward, bringing her power back into the world, reviving the duality that once defined her? The idea choice is yours. The whispering stops. The temple is silent once more, but now you are not alone. You have heard the call. You have felt the weight of her presence. And now, you know that Ishtar's story is far from finished. It is just beginning again. As the final echoes of Ishtar's call fade into the stillness of the temple, you stand alone in the heart of her forgotten sanctuary. The dust of ages settles around you, the air heavy with the weight of lost divinity. Yet in the depths of your soul, you feel a strange stirring. It is not fear nor sorrow, but something more primal, something ancient. An awareness that the journey you have embarked on is far from over. The name of Ishtar still lingers on, your lips forbidden though it may be. It is no longer just a name, it is a calling. A call that has passed through the corridors of time, through the cracks in the temple, through the whispered words of her last followers. It is a call that will never fade, no matter how many gods are forgotten. No matter how much history is erased, Ishtar's power is not gone. It sleeps beneath the surface, waiting for those who dare to awaken it. You turn from the altar, from the broken statues, from the crumbled walls of Ishtar's temple, and step into the outside world. The light of the moon, now waning, bathes the world in its cold glow. And as you walk into the darkness, you know that this is only the beginning. Ishtar's name may be a taboo, but her essence is far older than any rule, any divine decree. Her love and her war, her light and her dark, will endure, because they are not hers alone. They are the eternal forces that shape the very fabric of the universe. The path you walk is no longer a quiet one. You feel the weight of Ishtar's legacy upon you, pressing you forward, urging you to remember. Her duality, her struggle, her fall, and her resurrection have become your story too. And now the world will learn again of the goddess they forgot, the one who is still waiting, hidden in the folds of time, watching with eyes that are both loving and fierce. The road ahead is uncertain, filled with shadows and light, with the unknown and the forgotten. But you are not alone. The whispers of Ishtar will guide you just as they have guided those who came before you. You are part of her story now, her last follower, her last voice. And as you walk into the night, you hear it once more, faint but clear, the whisper of the goddess, older still. There are more gods. There are always more. And with that, the darkness opens before you, not as an end, but as the beginning of something new. A journey into the heart of the forgotten, the lost, and the divine. End of story. If your candle hasn't gone out yet, you might be ready for the next god.